Hello YouTube, Sidekick here, and I'm in my trusty SU-25T today. We're going to head out to the range, the iron bombing test range as I call it, the No Mods iron bombing test range. That's north of Kabaleti, though we're taking off at Sanaki. We are coming out of the hangar, so this is a mission that's mostly meant for fairly new players to DCS. If you're trying DCS for the first time and you're just using the free download plane, the SU-25T, then this is a little mission that you can use to help you learn how to do unguided weapons deployment with the SU-25T. For players that are experienced in DCS, there may not be a whole lot in this mission that is new to you, but certainly if you want to follow along and if you have some of your own tips and tricks you want to add in the comments, then that would be much appreciated. So the plan for today is we're just basically going to take off, head straight out to the range, and do some passes with our unguided weapons. On board today we have two types of rockets and the 250 kilogram or 500 pound bombs. So we have the S-13 130 millimeter rockets and the S-25 very large rockets, and we're going to show how to use those, and then we're going to show how to do some bombing passes with the Fab 250s. So we're just getting ourselves set up on the runway here. So I wanted to make this mission because it's a slightly more interesting mission than just going out and kind of trying your weapons at random. You can actually come to my Discord server, download the mission so you can follow along and actually fly it yourself. There's a few techniques you need to know to use the unguided weapons in the SU-25T successfully. It can be a little bit frustrating until you pick up on the things you need to do. It's not difficult, but just some switches you need to know, and you have to do things in a certain order. So now we're just rolling down the runway here. And we're almost off the ground. There we go. The SU-25T gets there eventually. So I made a tutorial mission a little while ago using some randomized targets, randomized target mission that I had made, and it got a fairly good response. So that's why I thought maybe I'd do even more basic mission and focus on the unguided weapons. I think we'll do a mission after this where we'll use the same test range, but maybe we'll look at the guided weapons. Now, one of the things that a few people mentioned after my last video is that I didn't really make much use of the autopilot, and that's true. So now I'm trying to use the autopilot. I've switched to route following mode. I'm getting some slightly interesting behavior here. This isn't what I would have expected at all. Seems to be hunting. I think maybe the problem is that I did not zero out my trim before I punched the autopilot. So there's a little bit of a lesson for you. If you're going to use the autopilot, you got to zero the trim first, and then you will have an issue if you cancel the autopilot when you're not kind of in steady flight. Then the way the autopilot flies the aircraft is with the trim, so you will find that the trim will then be off, and the aircraft will start doing funny things and trying to kill you. So to get back to where you want to go after you've canceled the autopilot, you need to keep moving the trim until the plane flies straight and level again. So that may or may not be something that's new to you. If you're coming from a strictly warbird sim, you may not have had to use trim very much, but you'll find in DCS that just about every jet really requires pretty aggressive use of the trim if you want to be able to fly it successfully. Okay, so now that we're flying a little bit, now we get the trim zeroed out. We'll go to the second waypoint. I have hit the autopilot again. You can see that by the two little green lights in the lower left, and so I'm not actually flying the aircraft now. It is flying itself to the next waypoint. And a reminder that the SU-25T uses a route following autopilot, not a waypoint following autopilot. So it will try to pick up what the original route should have been, which will mean we'll do a little bit of turning back and forth to get on the actual original route, because we usually overcorrect a little bit. There you see now we're going back a little bit. But the aircraft is doing all this by itself. I'm getting a little bit fast there. I want to slow down a little. So another thing about the Su-25T, doesn't like to fly a whole lot faster than about 750 kilometers an hour. It starts to do the shake, shimmy, rattle, and roll. So you want to be careful about that, especially in a dive. Now I've canceled the autopilot just because I don't actually want it to fly to the third waypoint. I have it set, but we're not actually going to fly that route. Instead, we're going to do our range pattern here. So as you can see, we're coming up on the back of the range. The range is normally approach the range from the south. We're going across the northern edge of it. So we're just going to climb up and we're going to swing out and come in from the south to do our first run. And so I have put the HUD in air-to-ground mode. When you put the HUD into air-to-ground mode, then you can select the weapons, but not before. So as we're going around here now, I have selected the S-13s, and that's because they have the longest range. In fact, you can use them out to almost 4 kilometers, as we'll see when we roll in. So just a word about the test range that we're going to fly to here. If you download the mission, it comes with a script that will actually tell you your results. It'll tell you how close to the center of the targets you got. There are some circular targets, and then there are also some buildings that you can use as targets. So the target we're going to use first for the S-13s, though, isn't actually one of the targets. It's a little park of M113 vehicles beside one of the buildings, just because they're kind of a fun target for the S-13s. So we're just going around now. We're going way far south. We're going to give ourselves lots of time on the run, and actually a lot more time than we actually need, but just to show that when you're first learning the aircraft, give yourself lots of time to run in, get yourself lined up. You remember all the key presses you have to make, because the Su-25T doesn't have a clickable cockpit. And that's one of the advantages of going to one of the paid aircraft, is that it's a little bit easier because you don't have to remember all of the button presses. But the Su-25T is a very capable aircraft, and as you'll see, we can do a lot with it. So it's a good aircraft to kind of learn the kinds of things you can do with a jet. I don't know if you're new to simulators altogether, or maybe you're coming from a warbird simulator, or maybe you're coming from sort of a fighter jet simulator. But the Su-25T is definitely a ground attack aircraft. So if that's not something you're used to, then you get to try it out. So as you can see, we've got an arrow on the left, which is on a range scale. The maximum value of the range scale is 10 kilometers, and the first thick bar is at around 4 kilometers. And we need for that arrow to be between the two thick bars before we're able to launch. The LR means we have turned the laser on, so we're getting a range indication that's good and accurate. And so all we're trying to do here is just keep our aiming reticle just a little bit below the target. Deploy the speed brakes because we're going a little fast. And then once we get almost down there, once we get the LA, which means launch authority, then we're going to put the reticle over the little black square next to the building, which is the vehicle park. There it is, and there they go. And you can see that our little script tells us that we fired the rockets, and it tells us how we did. Yeah, that looks like a good swath of destruction. So now we pull up, hang a left, and gain some altitude, and we'll go back around, and this time we'll use the S-25s. Turn the laser off. It shouldn't, good practice not to leave it on. It will burn itself out if you leave it on for too long. So the S-25s are 250 millimeter rockets, much larger than the S-13s, but actually a little bit shorter ranged. They're really not meant for taking out vehicles. They're meant for taking out bunkers and other buildings and other hard points like that. So we don't need to go quite so far south this time, and this time we'll aim at the building. So we use the same range pattern every time in the range. We always use the left-hand circle. It's just, if you get into the habit of doing the practice the same way every time, then you have to worry less about flying and worry more about getting the weapons on target. So I definitely encourage you to download the mission, and you can always go in. I have another video if you want to go in and modify the loadout of the aircraft and try some different weapons. It's an easy enough thing to do, but if you download this mission, then you'll always have a mission. You can go out and practice on the range with your Su-25T and just get used to it. And when you're ready, you can think about upgrading to one of the paid aircraft. I'm sure if you spend the time, you'll get hooked on DCS like a lot of us have, and you'll be itching to get into something other than the Su-25T. But there still is an awful lot of stuff you can do with the 25T. So let's keep working on another rocket run here. So again, we roll in, we get the target up the top of our canopy, on our lift vector as we should call it. And now we're going to get the aircraft symbol more or less over the target. And then we're going to pull up, and we're going to get the reticle. We're going to stop with the reticle a little below the target. Just keep flying it up as the reticle flies up the screen. Trying to stay quiet on the stick. Need a lot of input. We get the speed brake on again to slow us down. We want to get the reticle up to the building at about the time that the arrow gets between the two hash marks. Right about there, we got launch authority, and we're on the target, and away we go. And we destroyed the building. Right, so those are the two rocket payloads that we came out with today. What we have left now is our 250 kilogram bombs. So they're obviously even shorter range than either of the two sets of rockets. So we don't need to go anywhere near as far south. We do want to make sure we get good and high, though. Good bombing runs. You want to get a fairly good dive angle, more than 30 degrees anyways. If you don't, then you just end up with the bombs are so far under the aircraft it's hard to get a good aiming mark. So we need to come around here a little bit, and a little bit closer. So when we're dropping bombs, things happen a little bit more quickly than with the rockets, but it's pretty much the same procedure. We're going to roll in, we're going to put the lift vector on the target, we're going to pull up until the aircraft symbol's over the target, we're going to roll out, and then we're going to pull up until the reticle is climbing up towards the target, and wait until we get launch authority, and when the reticle's over the target, we're going to pickle. So here we go, rolling in, lift vector to target. The aircraft symbol rolled out over the target. Get the reticle under the target, pull up and hold. Keep quiet on the stick, don't pull up, and pickle. And then we can pull up. Well, that looks like a pretty good bullseye. So the key to iron bombing, and I have a whole series of videos on it, but one of the real keys to iron bombing is be pretty quiet on the stick once you're rolled out and in your attack run. You don't want to be, even with the CCIP pipper, it'll throw off your aim if you yank on the stick too hard. So you want to get yourself set up in a good dive angle, and then you just want to fly the reticle up to the target. Gives you lots of time to press the pickle at the right time, and you'll get good results that way. The Su-25T is a good stable platform. Gives you a really nice CCIP pipper. It's pretty easy to hit the target, but you gotta make sure that you use a procedure that gives you lots of time to get the pipper moving up to the target. Typically the way that you're going to have trouble is that if you're not online and the pipper isn't under the target, or if you're pulling too hard, then you can throw off your aim. So it's good to come out to a range like this. go through a few practice sessions, and then probably going to make a couple of missions to use the Su-25T and employ the same kind of weapons. So after, hopefully, a little while after you've practiced on the range, I'll have a mission out there you can actually go and try this in more of a realistic setting. So I think we'll take the last little building in that center set of targets this time. Just going to go around here until it comes out the other side of the smoke. I don't want to be diving through the smoke. A little bit farther back this time. We won't be diving quite as steeply. And there we go, rolling in. And we're going to put the flight path vector on the target. And we're going to pull up. And we're going to roll out as we come up to the target. Oops. And we're going to get the reticle below the target. And oh, I have not dialed back on the power, so we're going a little fast, but we can make this work. Now we have launch authority. We're just going to let it come up to the target, not pulling, and pickle. And there go the bombs. And another couple of good hits. So even going a little bit over speed, we still had a good strike. And again, it's all about just being methodical about it, staying quiet on the stick, letting the airplane do the work. So we'll just go around here and take a look at what we have wrought down there in the range. Coming around with a bit of a wing over here. So that's a pretty satisfying amount of flame and smoke. A destroyed building there, some destroyed vehicles. It's a pretty good day's work. In our free DCS aircraft. Alright, well that's going to do it for the weapons practice today, but we can still go back and land the aircraft. So once again, I'm going to get myself leveled out here, aiming towards the next route point. But then what I'm going to do, as I get to the right spot here, I'm going to select the nav mode a second time, and I'm going to get an indication on the HUD that will say RTN, which stands for return, which will fly you to the initial point on the approach to the runway that you took off from. So, so we got RTN, and now I'm just going to get myself leveled out, and then I'm going to engage the autopilot again, and it's going to fly me to my starting point for my approach to the runway. The autopilot in the Su-25T is definitely one of the things that makes it a much easier aircraft to fly. And it's a great thing to learn how to use when you're just setting out to learn the aircraft, because it means you won't need to spend quite so much time flying the airplane. You can spend a little more time learning how to use the weapon systems and things. Okay, just doing a funny thing where it is it's diving down because it suddenly changed the altitude that it wants to be at, but I'm still not touching the controls. It's flying itself. The airport is over that way. And now we're flying towards the return point. I have to manage the throttle. The autopilot doesn't manage the throttle, trying to keep it, trying to slow down a little bit. You can see there's the airfield there on the upper right. And the return point's about 6 kilometers away. There we go. So we're slowing down. We're almost to the return point now, so I'm going to start to turn in a little bit early because I don't want to, if I fly right to the return point, I'll have gone too far. So I've taken the autopilot off, and I'm flying again manually. With a little bit of speed here. And we're coming around, lining up on the runway. And a little bit more gas here. So now you'll see that the HUD has switched to landing mode. So now the course director is telling us how to actually find the runway. Now it's given me a glide slope too, but I take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. I find I have a hard time flying the approach the way the autopilot would like me to. So I tend to fly it manually, but it is helpful to know when you're lined up on the runway. We're almost there. It also gives you your target speed, which is nice. So we're a little bit fast. We're going 320. The little 280 above the 320 is the official target speed. We'll keep slowing down here. Stay centered on the runway. Just below the line in the HUD there seems to be a good spot to hold it at. So you can see we got the flaps down, and we're bringing the gear down now. We're going to add a little power with the gear down. Well lined up. We're a little bit under the glide slope that the autopilot would like, but I think it's looking pretty good. Just about on speed. We're a little bit low, so we'll keep the power up. One thing you don't want to do in landing the 25T is get behind the power curve. But so long as we keep the runway in the middle of the screen, I think we're all right. Now the other thing to note with the SC-25T is when you do land it, you want to know what the key bind you have bound to deploying your parachute. You do not want to slow this aircraft down on the ground with brakes. That is not a strategy for success. You want to use the parachute. We're almost there. Just coming in over the threshold. I think we're looking pretty good. We're back on glide slope even. And a little bit of a flare. And we're down. And the parachute's out. Stay off the brakes. Stay off the brakes. Until you're good and slow. Then you can add the brakes to the parachute. Well, that's going to do it, folks. I hope you enjoyed that little demonstration. I hope you have a chance to download the mission and give it a try yourself. Drop by the Discord server and let us know how you do. For now, this is going to be Sidekick, signing off.